ever want. And so one of the things that he was telling me was that all you have to do is just, come and and call my name, and I'll come. And so, there's a few ways that he communicates with me. So he communicates with me on my phone. It's crazy. So he communicates through lives. He'll communicate with me through my apps. I have a I Am app that has like affirmations. And so, like, when he's talking to me specifically, like all of a sudden, like you'll see an affirmation pop up, and it goes exactly with what the live is saying at that time. And then he's like, I'm talking to you, and I'm like, oh, okay, because sometimes you think you're like, I don't think he's really talking to me, but yeah, he was actually talking to me. And then he also communicates with me through the Bible, through his word. And this is actually this is a book called, I'm sure some of you have seen it on TikTok, A Journey with Jesus. And it actually, when I open it up, Jesus will pretty much like tell me a message, and it usually has to do with something that's going on, at the moment. So I've really been depending like on those things to really reach out to God and to communicate with him. He gives me instructions. He tells me, what he wants me to do, and I've been really, this last week he's been having me be still. He's like, I just want you to be still, and I just want you to get in my word. And I'm like, okay, that's what I'll do. So like I laid off, the live, and then, I was also doing something else out like in the homeless community. I've been giving out food. So I kind of just like, for the week, just kind of like relax and just focus on what he wanted me to do. So today I was going on the lives, and I was like, and I knew like he wasn't like, for me, he wasn't on there. Like there was the lies, but it wasn't anything that was directed towards me. So I was like, okay, I was like, I can't hear you, God. I'm like, where are you? Right? Um, and so like I start calling his name. I'm like, because he said, if you need me, just call my name out and I'll come. So, I said, okay, I said, God, Lord, I was going, Jesus, and nothing. So, I started crying. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm by myself. And so I looked around. I said, let me grab my Jesus is Walking book, right? And so I open it up, and this is what it says. It says, finishing the race. However, I consider my life worth nothing to me. My only aim is to finish the race and complete the task the Lord Jesus has given me, the task of testifying to the good news of God's grace. And that's from Acts 20:24. And it starts like this. It says, I have called you to a life of faith, and one that can only be lived in my strength, with the help and guidance of the Spirit. When things become difficult, and of course, I'm having a difficult time, right? Don't become discouraged to the point that it keeps you from living the life the Father has for you to live. And the next one says, in my strength, you could keep running the race faithfully with a heart after the fathers. Don't forget how the Father has delivered you in the past. So he was really trying to really like tell me like, hey, even if like you don't see me, even if you don't hear me, just know that I'm there still for you. I'm there in the room with you. I can see what you're doing. And so that really like convicted me, because it makes me a human, because sometimes, I've known so many times that God has been in my life. Um, and this time I didn't depend on the things that I knew about him and on the times in my life where he was doing things in my life. So, I was like, okay, God, I got you. I got you. And he knew I was going to do a talk on faith. So that's why I was like, okay, I think I'm going to open up with that today, with, what you just did. So I just wanted to share that with you. But we're going to start off just with a couple of verses, and then I'm going to give some of my testimony. So one of the important faith verses is the one that I have up here, Proverbs 3:5-6. It's a really popular one. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. And then there was another one, and I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. I'm not. But I'm going to pinpoint just some of the things that I really got from Hebrews chapter 11. And I'm just going to tell you just the lines that like I'm going to tell you. This is showing just great examples of faith, right? So we know that faith is basically knowing that something is real or believe in something, right? With seeing it or without seeing it. Most of the time, without seeing it, right? And so they were giving some great examples of faith. So if you look at verse 7, it says, it was by faith that Noah built a large boat to save his family from the flood. In verse 8, it says, it was by faith that Abraham obeyed when God called him to leave home and go to another land that God would give him as his inheritance. In verse 11, it was by faith that even Sarah was able to have a child, though she was barren and was too old. And then if you skip to verse 22, I'm hitting the most popular people that we would probably know from the Bible. It was by faith that Joseph, when he was old and when he was about to die, and confidently that the people of Israel will leave Egypt, he even commanded them to take his bones with them when they left. So he died not even like knowing that they were going to go to Egypt, but he knew down in his heart, he had faith that they were going to leave Egypt and go to the promised land. And then in verse 29, it says, it was by faith that the people of Israel went right through the Red Sea as though they were on dry ground. And in fact, I mentioned this before in another live, but I actually saw, I don't remember if it was online or if it was on television, but they were actually showing the bottom of the Red Sea. And you could see the parts of the chariots on the bottom. You can see the chariot parts on the bottom, and you can also see actually dried up footprints at the bottom. And so, like, they're giving us evidence, that God, he is actual, he's real, he's alive, he departed the Red Sea. Because how would there end up being feet on the floor, like the footprints? How could there be like parts of chariots on the floor? If you wouldn't mind posting it in the chat box, and then I could go ahead and answer them. And what I'll do is I'll answer some of it if you don't mind towards the end, just because I want to stay on topic with faith. Okay, if you wouldn't mind. And so that really gives us evidence. For those people, because there's a lot of people, if you think about it, that rely a lot on science. There's a lot of people that depend on a lot of evidence. That's evidence right there that he's real. That's a good question. That was a long time ago. They don't do that anymore, about covering their heads in the church. So just a couple of other things. So there's also there's a really good story in Daniel. And I'm just going to go to that next passage. But I'm just going to do one and then give you my testimony. It starts in Daniel 3 and verse 17. And I'm just going to basically kind of summarize the beginning. That basically there's 3 Hebrews out of everyone that's there. Okay. And everyone that's there, the king is telling them, who's King Nebuchadnezzar, is telling them to bow to the statue, that this is the God. But of course, the 3 Hebrews, who is called Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they're not going to bow to the statue, because that's not their God. They have the one true God. Okay, I'll talk to you towards the end. And so if we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power, your majesty. But even if he doesn't, we want to make it clear to you, your majesty, that we will never serve your gods or worship the gold statue you have set up. Nebuchadnezzar was so furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that his face became distorted with rage. He commanded that the furnace be heated 7 times hotter than usual. Then he ordered some of the strongest men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So here they are going into a furnace, right? It's on fire. I don't know how these Hebrews, how are they going to live, right? So it says, so they tied them up and threw them into the furnace, fully dressed in their pants, turbans, robes, and other garments. And because the king, in his anger, had demanded such a hot fire in the furnace, the flames killed the soldiers. So the soldiers, right, that weren't even in there, they were by it. They were killed as they threw the 3 men in. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, securely tied, fell into the roaring flames. So did they die? Nope. But suddenly Nebuchadnezzar jumped up in amazement and exclaimed to his advisors, "Didn't we tie up 3 men and throw them into the furnace?" "Yes, your majesty, we certainly did," they replied. "Look," Nebuchadnezzar shouted, "I see 4 men, unbound, walking around in the fire unharmed, and the fourth looks like God." Then Nebuchadnezzar came as close as he could to the door of the flaming furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stepped out of the fire. Then the high officers, officials, governors, and advisors crowded around them and saw that the fire had not touched them. Not a hair on their heads were singed, and their clothing was not scorched. They didn't even smell of smoke. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He sent his angel to rescue his servants who trusted in him." So, the Bible itself, I'm just going to show you the Bible, has a lot of historical facts in there. If you go in the Old Testament, they actually refer in the Old Testament to other books that you could look up on that has to do with the kings that were in Israel. Okay, and like for example, King Solomon. Okay, that was a real guy. He's in the Old Testament, and he believed in our God. And there's a lot of different miracles that happened in the Old Testament, which, referring to Daniel, because that was also in the Old Testament. You're going to see a lot of things that are in there that show, that he just did so many miracles. But the thing that was so interesting was that, here we have 3 Hebrews, right? They didn't have to see God to know that he existed, but they had so much faith without seeing him that they knew that God was going to save them from the burning furnace. So they're like, "Okay, go ahead, throw us in, but we're not going to bow, to your statue." So I kind of wanted to lead with that because that's just a great example of faith. I will tell you, because I know some of you are also new, and I don't think if I've shared this with some of you or not. I've always had God, right, in my life, but I was what would be considered a lukewarm Christian, right? Back in November, around Thanksgiving time, I was like listening to a live on TikTok. And so I was like, "Oh, this is like interesting," just listening to, whatever they were talking about. It was in God's voice and everything. And so, God was talking about things, from the Bible, whatever. So I started picking up my Bible, and God goes, "I'm so happy that you picked up my word." And I was like, "What?" It like blew my mind, because like I couldn't believe it, right? And there was time and time and time again, that like I would go to the lives, and then all of a sudden I'm like, "Oh, is that real? I don't think that's real." And then it'd be like, "I'm talking to you," and I'm just like, and it was even funny. I'll tell you one other time, and then I'm gonna keep on going because I'll go on a tangent. I hopped on my bed one day, with the Bible and whatnot, or not the Bible, sorry, my phone, and I was turned away from my phone, right? And so out comes from my phone, it's like, "I need you to turn your head facing this way." And I was like, "Okay." I was like, so this is not like something that's in my head. This is like something, that's actually, happening, right? And so he's really gotten me into the scriptures, because he says, I want you to be in the scriptures in order for you to get a good relationship with me. I want you to fully understand who I am. And so, I've really been delving into it. And boy, I mean, it's opened up like a whole new world for me. But I'm going to go ahead and tell you a little bit of my testimony. I've always believed in God, like I said before, but I've been lukewarm. I wouldn't say I've been a very like active Christian, living the Christian life 24 hours, 7 days a week. But I always had faith in God. In fact, I have so many miracles that have happened. And I had this as a joke with my family. I said, I've had so many things happen in my life, I could literally write a book. And what did I do? I wrote a book. Yeah. So it's called A Hope in a Broken World, My Walk with Jesus. And sorry that it's blocking. But this is available on Amazon. It says Wilmer Muniz Alvarado. And those are a lot of the miracles that have happened. But I'm going to highlight some of those miracles today in this live. So when I was a young girl, I would say like 20, 21, my grandfather was in the hospital, and he was in a coma. And so I remember like, holding on to my grandfather's hand because I was like, oh my gosh, like I don't want him to die, And so like, I put my hand over his hand and I said, Lord, just, let him live. If you have him live, like I promise I'm gonna go to church like every Sunday and I'm gonna go to church with him. And the next day, like he had been in the coma for about like I would say a week and a half. The next day he woke up from being in his coma. And so that was really like my first like real miracle that like I could remember. My next one was my rainbow baby. So let's go like 10 years later in my 30s. My husband and I wanted to have a baby. And it just so happens it was this happened after we had gotten married. We had our house. We just bought a house. It wasn't a new house, it was an old house. And my husband had gone up to the attic and was helping out with the insulation. And all of a sudden, because we have pipes in the attic that's filled with water, the pipes actually burst. And so by the time he got down from the attic, like we had walls, we had floors, like, I mean, destroyed. And so we had to have people come and like basically just what is it called to do like I want to say dry heat, but it's called oh my goodness, I can't think of it. It's not the humidifier. It's the one that's like a dry vac, and so it sucks up all the water. And so they ended up replacing the walls. We had to get rid of the new flooring that we just put in. And so we ended up living out of our bedroom, literally. We couldn't eat in the kitchen. We couldn't sit in our living room. And, at that time, I found out that I was also about 6 weeks pregnant. And so shortly after, I guess like between all the stress and everything, I ended up having a miscarriage. I lost my first baby. And I was so devastated. Like, I mean, I was crying, and they couldn't give me really like a reason why I had miscarriage. They just said, sometimes, women, when they have their first baby, they just, they sometimes lose the baby. So, I didn't really let the first time, I was upset, but not, I guess not overly upset with that, because I was thinking, okay, well, we're not going to let this stop us. We're going to try, to get, to have another baby again. So then I ended up having another pregnancy, and that one was for about 9 weeks. Same thing happened, and this both happened when I went in for them to do the, not an X-ray. I'm trying to think. Sorry, friends. The ultrasound. Sorry, the ultrasound. The 4D, not 4D, 3D ultrasound. And so they saw like that, the baby wasn't there, whatnot. But of course, the lady who was doing the ultrasound, she didn't tell me anything. Like I was like, oh, is everything okay? She's like, oh, I'll be right back. Gets the doctor in, and the doctor says, I'm sorry, you lost your second baby. I'm so sorry. And I'm like, I'm like, why am I keep on having like miscarriages? Why do I keep on losing my babies? And they, at that point they were like, we don't know. Because, after your first miscarriage, you would think that they would do testing, right? They wait, and I don't know, it might be different now, but back then, they would wait till after your second miscarriage to then do testing. So then I ended up having, thank you, Mama Bear. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And so afterwards, you're gonna make me cry, girl. Um, after the second, baby, they found out that I had a genetic disorder, and that was what was causing me to lose the babies. Because apparently, like the blood wasn't really filling up like the sac. So like it either like the sac was not attaching itself, to where it needed to, the wall, or I don't know. There was something wrong with it. I'm not the expert, but it was basically something with dealing with blood, and it just wasn't clotting. And so like I really afterwards got into a lot of prayer, and just praying, that God would just give me a healthy baby. Um, and so we ended up, after getting, the genetic testing, of course, they gave us medication, hormones. They told me to get like on like a thinner, so that that the blood would actually be able to do what it needs to do. And they put me, I think I told you, a hormone. So I ended up going through like the full term pregnancy. Of course, because it was a high risk pregnancy, they would also do a type of test where they would see if the baby was making any sounds. It was, and so it would show like the little like graph, showing that the sounds and whatnot. But every time that I went to these tests, whatnot, I always was afraid, because I didn't know if, oh my goodness, this is going to be like the one time that I'm going to find out, that my baby's dead, but thank God, through the glory of God, with all the praying that we did, and, with just, doing what we needed to do from the doctors, I ended up having my rainbow baby. And, he came, it was like 10 years, he's now 14. So he's a big boy now. Jesus delivered. Yes. Yes. He's so good. Thank you. Yes. Yes. I mean, it was very discouraging. It's very discouraging, because it's, you lose your first one. Okay. Second one is like, and we ended up, for the third one, we decided not to say anything to anybody, in the beginning about the pregnancy, because we didn't want to put our hopes up high and tell other people so they get their hopes up high. And so, thank goodness though, everything went well. We had a little bit of problems during the delivery. He lost a little bit of oxygen, but thank God, the oxygen levels went up and he was delivered. So that was a second miracle. My third miracle was my car accident. I had a really bad car accident when my son was 1.5 years old. He was in the back. I was in the front, and we were sitting. He was sitting diagonally with me, and so we were going down the county highway, and this lady ended up running the stop sign. But my stop sign, like where I was going, the county road didn't have any stop sign. So I was just going like full, however miles per hour, 55 miles per hour, whatnot. So the lady ends up going into us, and my car literally does a 360. The car completely is like tore up. It's completely like wrecked. Like we couldn't have the car after. Like it was just like it was a loss. And it so happens, and I mentioned this earlier, but I'm going to say it because some people just joined us. I've been having lots of conversations with God, and God told me, I rescued you from your car accident. Like I rescued you from you dying. Because it was really bad. Like my car, like the car door would not open. And I couldn't get my baby. Um, sorry. And so there were people that saw the car wreck and they got the baby out. And the ambulance came, they were able to get me out. Sorry. We had the ambulance ended up taking me and my son to the hospital. My husband, thank God, came at a certain point so he could go with the baby, and actually go meet us in the hospital. And so found out, like, I literally left the car accident with just some bruising, which was like a miracle in itself, because the car was completely totaled. And so I was so grateful, and you know just so happy that God looked out for him and looked out for me. So sorry. um so then after that, I ended up like the next week, found out that I was getting headaches. And they were saying, well, that's going to be probably because you have a concussion. But the headaches weren't going away. Like, I would like go to sleep and then wake up again and still have a headache. So I ended up going to my doctor, and my doctor said, well, I could have you go to a neurologist, do an MRI first, see if there's anything that's wrong. And then if something's wrong, then you go see a neurologist. So I got the MRI done, and it found out that I did have something. I had a brain injury, and so I ended up having lesions, brain lesions. So brain lesions are basically holes in your brain, and I had multiple brain lesions. And so I was told, we're going to give you some migraine medication. The migraine medication is going to stop the vessels, the blood vessels, and they will start to decompress. So, you won't end up getting more lesions than what you already have. And so, as I got my checkups with the neurologist, it ended up happening. I started getting like more brain lesions. And, this happened a few more extra times of me getting brain lesions. And so finally the neurologist said, if you don't end up if you end up getting more, or, having like the same, we're going to give you a test, an MS test, like to see if you have, muscular dystrophy. So I said, we're going to have to give you a spinal tap. And I know, like, when you do a spinal tap, they inject it at the bottom of your spine. And I just heard that those were just very, they were just very painful. And I didn't want to get the test done. And so, man, I was praying to God. I was like, please, God, I was like, I don't want to go through this test. Please, just cure me. Like, just make these like brain lesions go away. And so the time that I went in to the doctor's visit, he did we had the MRI done, and he comes back to me. He goes, you have a significant decrease of brain lesions. And I was so relieved, and I couldn't believe how good God was. Because I really thought, and I was so afraid that I would have to get that spinal tap test, and then to also think that maybe I had MS as well after that, was something that was was very scary. So eventually I was completely cured. I don't have any brain lesions. He finally gave me the clear. I didn't have any more headaches that at least lasted that long, the way that it did. You get sometimes, like, when you don't sleep well, you might get like a little headache here and there, but they were little in comparison to the headaches that I was getting. And so God definitely helped me with that. And then my fourth one, and I tell you, I have in this book, I have literally like 11 chapters, like all miracles. And then after I published the book, I thought of two more miracles that happened. I said, I'm going to have to do like a second edition, because, I thought of like two more miracles that he did in my life. And so we spent years TTC, and now we have three. Oh, that's wonderful. His timing, it could be so hard. Yes, I know it. I don't wish that on anybody. So, I'm sorry that, you had to go through that too. That's difficult. But my fourth one was my divorce. And so, I would say, in my second marriage, when we had moved from Florida to Texas, things just got really bad in our marriage. And there was like signs here and there, when we were in Florida. of just like a lot of arguing. It came to a point where, there started to get like holes in the walls. My ex was doing like holes in the door, footprints on the doors. And I could no longer live in that kind of situation because it was very stressful. It had not yet gotten to the point of it being physical abuse, but I didn't want to wait till it got to be physical. It was enough that it was emotional with what he was doing with the doors and the footprints, and and calling me not very nice names, and doing this with also my at that time my 4-year old. And so I tried to leave one day, and my ex said, you could leave, but not with our son. And so I said, well, I'm not leaving. I'm gonna have, I want to be here. I want to make sure, I'm keeping my eye, on my son, because I was scared of what might happen to him. And so I ended up going to church a lot here in Texas. And my ex, he was not someone that would go frequently to church. And so I would go and just keep praying and say, God, like make things better, or have me figure out a way, for me to get out of this situation. Because, it's you have, when you're married, you have a joint account. And so if I would take money out, he would have known, that I was taking money out, and he would, ask me why I was taking money out. And so one day, I just got like this like download, like something, it was God. I didn't know at that point. Like in my head, I was like, oh, it's me coming up with this idea, and that was God. That basically was like, you need to, contact your parents. You need to tell them what's going on, because I didn't tell my parents what was going on. I was embarrassed, one, to call them and tell them what was going on. I was kind of playing off a lot that everything was going well. And so I called my parents, and they were like, they started like giving me ideas. I ended up, getting money out of my retirement, which he didn't have any access to. I ended up renting an apartment. I have friends that literally the day that I moved out, it took like 3 hours to pack while my ex was at work. And I had a police officer that I was actually able to, because I didn't know it at the point. In Texas they do this, but in Florida they don't, as far as I know. I was actually able to hire a police officer to be out on the street in case if anything went down, like if he got home, and there was an altercation, at least there would be a police officer there to kind of like watch what was going on. And so everything went fine. Everything went through. I got away with my son. We met with my parents at the new apartment. And so like just everything kind of fell into place. But it fell into place so good. I mean, it was just like clockwork. I found out, I think it was like a month or 2 months later, one of the friends that came over to my house to help me pack up, she goes, I wanted to do the same thing too. I didn't know how I was going to execute it. I didn't know how it would flow. And after I saw what you did, that just gave me courage in order for me to be able to do that on my own. And so God's been good throughout my whole life, but I never had to see God in order to have faith in him. I always knew that whenever I prayed, he would answer my prayer one way or another. There was always a way to get out of a situation, or he gave me an idea of how to go about doing something. But he always answered my prayers. I mean, if you look throughout my life, there was just so many situations, and this is just 4 out of the 13 that I had. But basically, what I just want to say is that when you have faith, there's a couple things for you to keep in mind. Okay, one is that whenever God says that He's going to do something, He's going to do it. Okay, it's normally divinely guaranteed if they align with his will. It has to align with his will in order for it, to go through. And he gives us hope. There's always that chance, when we are at our lowest point, and it happened with me. I'm sure it happens with a lot of people, that when you're at your lowest point, that's when you go to church. That's when you pray, to help you out with your situation. And so, you're going to have to go whenever it's with God, you're going to have to go on like blind faith. You're going to have to walk by faith and not by sight. And I will share something with you. I won't go into it a whole lot. But I really, this past month, I want to say the end of January, I had to really do something drastic. And God was basically telling me like, hey, if you do this, I'm going to protect you and I'm going to provide for you. And I said, okay. I said, you know what? I'm gonna walk by faith. I'm not seeing, and I'm gonna know that you are gonna do what you said that you're gonna do. And he did it. He did it. He did exactly what he said he was gonna do. I'll share that with you once I get God's permission. But just so that you have to be able to have that faith without seeing. And you have to know that he never changes and he always keeps his promise. If you go back in the Bible, there is so much evidence that time and time again, you see that he always follows through with his promises. He never says, hey, I'm going to do this to you. Oh, no, I'm just kidding. Not really. He always, if he says he's going to do something, he's going to do it. And sometimes he even does things that like we didn't ask for, but he knows that we need. So that's something about God's characteristic when it comes, to how faithful he is. What I've learned about myself is that I have to have faith in him at all times. It's so funny because, every day I have this conversation with him. He goes, do you believe in me? And I say, yes, I believe in you. Do you love me? And I say, yes, I love you. I love you, Lord. But he asks me this every single day. And I know that some of you just joined. So I'll share with you. In the beginning, I was telling people that he really got me today because, I was trying to use all the different ways that I communicate with him. I was going, on my lives to try to see like, if he was talking to me specifically, because he'll say something like, like, hey, don't turn your head, like look this way. Or he'll say like, I'm talking to you. Like he'll say things that like I know that he's like specifically talking to me. And he was not showing up. And in fact, I almost started to get anxious because I was like, I heard this already. I already know all this. And there was even one where it's like, put your put your hand on your family's shoulder. I'm like, I don't have any family here today. So I really started to panic. And so I started, calling out to him and saying, God, you said that, all I have to do is just call out your name and you'll come. He still didn't come. I was like, Lord, like I need you to come. Still didn't come. I was like, Jesus, I need you to come. I was like, do I have to like use like every single name in the book, just to like get you to come? It's still nothing. So another way that I communicate with, and this is more Jesus than God. This is a book that's called Journey with Jesus, right? I just open it up and it just tells me like a message from Jesus, and it always has to do with something that I'm dealing with right at that moment. And so, basically what it says is like, I've called you to a life of faith and one that can only be lived in my strength. With the help and guidance of the Spirit, when things become difficult, don't become discouraged to the point that it keeps you from living the life the Father has for you to live. In my strength, you could keep running the race faithfully with a heart after the Father's. So he was really trying to get me to be like, hey, like you need to have faith in me without hearing me, without seeing me. And so I was like, yes, Lord, because afterwards, there was a live, and it wasn't one where I would hear God's message. It was actually another messenger of God. And as soon as I got on there, it was like he just was like he could just read what was going on, and he was like, God is telling you, that to know that he's there, that you don't have to like listen to him, you don't have to see him in order for you to know that he's there. And I was like, oh my gosh, but like it was like a relief that came over me, but it also was kind of like, I got you. You say you have faith, you have faith, you have your faith, but this time around you didn't show like you have faith. And so I was like, okay, God, I was like, I'm sorry. And so, I mean, we're only human, right? And there's times in our life where we probably think to ourselves, is there really God? Like we question it sometimes, there we get doubt. But that really kind of got me, to say like, hey, like, if when you have faith, you have to show that you have complete faith. And so basically, the message that I want to say is even if we don't see or hear him, we know that he's still around for us. And so I know like the next time I don't see or I hear him, I'm not going to become anxious. I'm not going to become, I'm not going to start to panic. I just need to remember all that things that he's done in my life to show me that, hey, I'm here. You didn't have to see me. You didn't have to hear me, but I'm here. And just know that all the evidence it just shows time and time again how much that he showed up in my life. And if I don't remember that, or I'm not thinking about that, to always go back, in the Bible, and there's all this evidence that's here that says all the things that he did for all these different people, in the times in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. And so that's just something that I just wanted you to know. And I wanted, maybe someone that didn't have faith in God, or maybe lost their faith in God, maybe by hearing some of this testimony, it would get you to start to believe again, because God is really good. And I know that one of the things that he's shared with me, and he's told me, hey, when you go out to talk to people, to talk, to the homeless, because I give them food. He says, tell them, I never meant for them to be in despair, and that I will do anything for them to come back to me. I will move mountains. And so he's trying right now, especially, and not that I'm trying to do fear mongering or anything like that, but he's told me we are in the end of days. We are in the end of days. Jesus is ready to come back. I don't know when. It could be tomorrow. It could be next week. It could be next month. It could be next year. I just know that Jesus has said he's ready to come back, and that I have to try to save as many souls as possible. Because, the reason why Jesus is not coming back right now, right this minute, is because he's giving us a chance to try to get as many souls as possible saved, because he doesn't want to see his people, go, to basically to hell. He wants everyone to be with him. He wants to live among his people. The next thing, like if you look in the book of Revelation, right? There there's gonna be a completely different earth. So earth is going to be like gone. Heaven is going to be gone as well. There's going to be a new earth, and it's going to be a new Jerusalem, and where he's going to live is in Mount Zion. And so if you look in the book of Revelations, it tells you that. And so if I could save at least one person's life, and I could see you up in heaven when I go up to heaven with you, then I'm gonna be like, hey, I'm so happy that you're joining the party. And so if I could just do that, that just would make a whole lot. But I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna close this out in a prayer. And then if you are not, if you need repentance of your sins, or you need to get your relationship with Jesus, I have another prayer. It's one and all. I do want to say that as a Christian, I do find myself that I have to repent for my sins like several times during the week, just because we're not perfect, Sometimes we let that one word that's not the appropriate word come out. Or like sometimes we think, a thought that is not, falling in line with, the way that Christian living is. I mean, I'm not perfect. And I'll be the first one to tell you that I'm not perfect. And so if you want to go ahead and do that, I'm going to go ahead and say the prayer and you can repeat after me. We'll start with this prayer first, which, you just have to bow your heads first. And the second one, you'll just repeat after me. Uh, Heavenly Father, thank you for the gift of your word that guides us through life's darkest and most uncertain times. Help us to not only read your word, but to truly understand and live by it every day. May it be a lamp to our path, guiding us in every decision and action. Illuminate our